Confessions made at the edge of death can reveal secrets no one was ever meant to hear. Some are shocking, others are deeply unsettling, but all are real. In this video, we'll look at 5 of the most disturbing deathbed confessions ever recorded. Stories where the truth finally surfaced when it was already too late to change anything. It was November 12, 2004, in Somerville, Massachusetts. 54-year-old Geraldine Kelly was lying on her deathbed, suffering from breast cancer. She had lived a quiet life for years, but that day she asked her daughter to visit her. What she said next would completely change everything her family thought they knew. Geraldine looked at her daughter and said, "I ended your father's life." She then revealed something even more shocking. His body was still around, stored in a freezer inside a nearby storage unit. Geraldine said this had happened back in the early 1990s. For over a decade, she had kept both the truth and his body hidden. Geraldine DiMarzio Kelly and John Kelly grew up in Somerville. They met as kids, later married, and started a family. Their daughter, Sherry Ann, was born in 1970, followed by their son, John P., in 1971. Life at home was far from peaceful. In 1981, the family attended a wedding where John got drunk and got into a fight with several guests. The fight ended with the death of his brother-in-law. Fearing blame, John fled Massachusetts with his family. They moved to California and tried to start over. They settled in Ventura, where they managed the Victoria Motel, a small 36-room property located off Highway 101. John handled maintenance while Geraldine managed operations. But behind closed doors, their marriage was full of conflict. Geraldine told people John was abusive, and their fights were constant. By 1989, both children had left home and cut contact with their parents. Around 1991 or 1992, Geraldine called her children with shocking news. John had died in Las Vegas after stepping into traffic while drunk. It seemed believable given his history with alcohol. But when her daughter asked where he was buried, Geraldine snapped, saying she didn't know why they cared. John had never loved them. She repeated that same story to friends and co-workers. One of them, motel maid Marilyn Contreras, remembered Geraldine being bitter whenever John's name came up. She never questioned the story until years later. After Geraldine's deathbed confession, her daughter contacted a lawyer who alerted police 2 days later. Following Geraldine's directions, investigators searched a Somerville storage unit and found a freezer sealed with duct tape. Inside were human remains wrapped in plastic and blankets, so well preserved they were described as mummified. The remains matched John Kelly's description, about 5 feet 6, 135 pounds, with tattoos of a panther, a doll, and a skull. The cause of death was a single gunshot to the back of the head. Police later found a .38 caliber gun among Geraldine's belongings. Investigators believe she ended John's life in late 1991 or early 1992 in their California home. She stored his body in a freezer, keeping it there for 6 years before moving it to Massachusetts in 1998. She then rented the Somerville storage unit and kept paying for it until her death, a total of 13 years. Those who knew Geraldine described her as tough and private. She ran the motel strictly, wasn't easy to scare, and even kept attack dogs and a boa constrictor as pets. Motel owners Don and Valerie Kyunki said she once rushed out after claiming her storage unit was leaking, likely referring to the freezer. To most people, she appeared to be an ordinary, strict manager. Contreras described her as looking like a librarian, adding that no one would have ever guessed she carried such a secret. John's past also hinted at their troubled life. According to a friend, Thomas McCann, John was skilled but hot-tempered and often drank heavily. He described Geraldine as strong and unwilling to back down. Prosecutors believe Geraldine confessed out of guilt and concern, fearing her children might one day be blamed if the body was found. Middlesex District Attorney Martha Coakley said that Geraldine's concern was for her children. John had been estranged from his children and most of his family, so few noticed his disappearance. For over a decade, his children believed their mother's story until the truth surfaced. Authorities in both Massachusetts and California later confirmed through autopsy that John Kelly died from a gunshot wound matching the weapon found with Geraldine. For 13 years, she lived with a secret that no one suspected, until the end forced her to finally tell the truth. It was August 8, 2000, in Beckley, West Virginia. 41-year-old Susan Carter and her 10-year-old daughter, Natasha Alex Carter, suddenly disappeared. They lived in a small house on Kyle Lane, owned by a man named Larry Webb. Susan had moved in with Webb while going through a difficult custody battle with her ex-husband, Rick Lafferty. She was trying to rebuild her life and needed a place to stay. Webb's home seemed like a safe option, but on that August day, both Susan and Alex vanished without a trace. No one could reach them. No messages, no goodbyes. Inside the house, Alex's toys and clothes remained neatly in place. Police searched the property, nearby woods, and neighboring towns for weeks. Flyers with Alex's photo spread across West Virginia. Her father, Rick, never gave up, spending years searching and speaking to anyone who might know something, but no clues ever surfaced. The case went cold. No witnesses, no leads, no arrests. Only one fact remained. The last place Susan and Alex were seen was Larry Webb's house. Then, more than 20 years later, everything changed. In April 2024, Webb, now in his 80s, was sitting in Mount Olive Correctional Complex. The year before, he had been charged in connection with Alex's disappearance after new evidence came to light. Because of his poor health and dementia, his trial never began. The case had been reopened in 2021 when the FBI obtained new search warrants for Webb's property. During one search, investigators discovered something hidden behind a baseboard in Alex's old bedroom, a bullet lodged in the wall. Forensic tests later confirmed that the blood found on it matched Alex Carter's DNA. Despite this, Webb denied involvement. He told investigators that he loved the little girl, but deep down, he knew what really happened. In April 2024, while suffering a medical emergency in prison, Webb suddenly asked to speak with investigators. What he said next shocked everyone. He confessed. Prosecutor Ben Hatfield later said the statement was detailed and consistent. Webb admitted that back in 2000 he confronted Susan after noticing some money missing from his home. The argument got out of control, and he used a weapon on her. Realizing what he had done, Webb panicked. Alex had witnessed the tragedy, and fearing she might tell someone, he turned the weapon on her too. The bullet found in the wall confirmed this part of his story. Webb told investigators he wrapped both Susan and Alex in bed linens and placed them in the basement. Over the next 2 days, he dug a shallow grave in the woods behind his house. When it was ready, he buried them side by side and covered the area to hide what he had done. For 24 years, Webb lived freely while Rick kept searching for his daughter. Even after the case was reopened, Webb denied everything until his final days. In his confession, he tried to describe where he buried them, but his memory had faded too much to recall the exact spot. On April 22, 2024, just 6 hours after Webb passed away at Montgomery General Hospital, investigators found human remains buried exactly where he said they would be. Forensic tests confirmed they were Susan and Alex Carter. During a press conference, law enforcement described it as one of the most haunting cases they had ever solved. Prosecutor Hatfield said Webb's confession matched the evidence perfectly. FBI agent Tony Rousa, who also spoke, said as a father himself he could not imagine anything more painful. Rick Lafferty was there as well. He said it was kind of a sad day, but also a happy day, because he could finally bring his baby home. After 24 years of searching, he had at last found the answers he had been looking for. The case of Susan and Alex Carter became one of West Virginia's longest-running mysteries. The truth lay buried just a few feet from their home. Larry Webb died before facing justice, but his confession finally ended decades of silence and gave a father long-awaited closure. It was the afternoon of January 11, 1867, in Dayton, Ohio. A teenage boy returned home after a long day and stepped into a scene that would haunt him forever. His 18-year-old sister, Christine Kett, was lying motionless at the top of the basement stairs. Her lower body was in the kitchen, and her upper body slumped toward the stairway. Her hands and face were covered in gunpowder, and beside her was a pistol. But it was immediately clear that this was no accident. Christine had severe head injuries, likely from a sharp tool such as an axe or hatchet. Her life had been taken in her own home. Christine was known as kind, bright, and well-liked. Now her life had ended brutally, and no one knew why. Horrified, the boy ran for help. Neighbors arrived first, followed by police, as a crowd gathered outside their Oak Street home. Moments later, Christine's mother, also named Christine, arrived. She had been out running errands. Seeing the people outside, she sensed something was wrong. When she saw her daughter's body, she collapsed in grief. Neighbors tried to comfort her, but she was inconsolable. Police examined the scene carefully. Blood covered the floor, and fragments of Christine's skull were on the steps. The pistol near her body had not been fired, even though there was gunpowder on her cheek and fingers. Investigators suspected someone had tried to make it look like Christine had taken her own life, but the head wounds made that impossible to believe. Officers first questioned Christine's brother, who said he'd just returned from work and found her. The pistol was his, but he claimed it had been disassembled and stored in a trunk since New Year's and didn't know how it ended up beside her. With a solid alibi, he was released. Investigators questioned others next. A neighbor claimed to have seen a strange man in the area, but no link was found. They also brought in Christine's rumored boyfriend, but again, no evidence tied him to the case. Then attention turned to Mrs. Kett. Neighbors described her as having a temper. They said she often argued with her daughter, sometimes shouting late into the night. One neighbor even claimed to have heard her threaten Christine before. Police found no proof against her. She claimed she'd been shopping all day, and without evidence, they released her. Weeks later, the case stalled, and officials ruled Christine's death accidental, though her wounds told a different story. No one was ever charged, and the case went cold. Soon after, the Kett family left Dayton. Some said they wanted to escape their grief. Others believed they were hiding something. Rumors about the mother never stopped. People remembered how she had shown no emotion at her daughter's funeral, standing silently as Christine's body was lowered into the ground. Years later, Mrs. Kett returned to Dayton and lived quietly. The story of her daughter's death faded away until 1884. At 63 years old, she fell seriously ill with a severe intestinal condition. Knowing she didn't have much time left, she called her son to her bedside and made a shocking confession. She said she had taken Christine's life. On that January day, Christine was late preparing dinner, which led to a heated argument. In anger, Mrs. Kett struck her daughter from behind with an axe. When Christine collapsed, she staged the scene to look like an accident, using her son's pistol and gunpowder before leaving to create an alibi. Before dying, she begged her son to keep her secret, but he couldn't. He went to the police and told them everything. 17 years after Christine's death, the truth emerged. The loudest mourner had been the one responsible all along. Christine's case was finally solved, revealing a disturbing truth. A mother had ended her daughter's life over anger and kept it buried for nearly 2 decades. It was February 7, 1980, in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Just after midnight, a 3-story townhouse went up in flames. Inside were 27-year-old Elizabeth Kinsey and her 5 children. All 6 lost their lives that night. The youngest was only 9 months old, and the oldest was 9 years old. Neighbors stood outside in shock as firefighters tried to control the fire. When it was finally out, investigators arrived to figure out what caused it. They believed it was arson. The fire marshal reported that 2 separate fires had started in one room, which suggested someone had used a flammable substance. But when the lab tested for it, nothing was found. Still, police pressed forward. The landlord, Hannah Quick, told police she saw 3 men enter the building just before the fire began. She claimed she knew who they were and said they left right after the flames started. Her story became the center of the case. That same day, police arrested 25-year-old Raymond Mora, 30-year-old Amaury Villalobos, and 34-year-old William Vasquez. Villalobos was taken from his bed in pajamas and brought to the scene. All 3 were charged with second-degree arson and 6 counts of taking lives. Their trial took place in 1981. The main evidence came from Quick's statement and the fire marshal's outdated theories. There were no fingerprints, no motive, and no other witnesses. But the jury believed Quick's words. All 3 were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Raymond Mora died in prison in 1989 at 44 years old. Villalobos and Vasquez stayed behind bars for decades, both insisting they were innocent. Their wives testified that the men were home that night, but no one listened. In 2011, things began to change. Brooklyn's district attorney's office had formed the Conviction Review Unit to re-examine questionable cases. Villalobos reached out, asking them to review the Park Slope fire. Assistant District Attorney Mark Hale agreed and reopened the case. He also contacted Adele Bernhard from New York Law School's Post-Conviction Innocence Clinic, who brought in fire expert John Lentini. Lentini reviewed all reports, photos, and testimonies and found something shocking. The fire had not been arson. The supposed signs of a flammable substance were actually the result of a flashover, a phenomenon where extreme heat in a closed space causes everything to ignite at once. This makes it look like multiple fires started, but it's actually one intense blaze. In 1980, investigators didn't yet understand this. Then came another twist. In 2014, before her death, Hannah Quick confessed to her family that she had lied. She never saw the men enter or leave the building. She admitted they had nothing to do with the fire. Her daughter also said Quick had struggled with substance use and was known for making up stories. On December 16, 2015, Vasquez and Villalobos appeared in Brooklyn Supreme Court before Judge Matthew Demick. Assistant District Attorney Hale told the court that the convictions were based on false testimony and bad science. The case had completely fallen apart. The judge vacated their convictions and sealed the case. After 34 years, the 2 men were finally free. Vasquez, now blind from untreated glaucoma in prison, told reporters that if he were to die that night, he would go in peace knowing justice had been done. He said he held no anger toward Quick, though he regretted having to pay such a price. Villalobos shared that it was faith that had carried him through. Raymond Mora's family was also present. His widow clutched a black and white photo of him, saying that although he was not there, they knew justice had finally been served. In 2017, New York City agreed to pay Vasquez and Villalobos a total of $30.9 million, $9.7 million each from the city, and another $5.75 million expected from the state. Mora's family also filed a separate legal claim. For over 30 years, 3 men were punished for a crime that never happened. A mother and her children lost their lives in a terrible accident, but what followed destroyed 3 more lives. In the end, there was no arson, no crime, only a tragic fire and a devastating mistake that took decades. It was July 3, 1969, in East Sussex, England. Brian Jones, one of the founding members of the Rolling Stones, was staying at his countryside home, Cochford Farm. At only 27 years old, he had recently been removed from the band he helped create. Struggling with personal problems and relying on alcohol and medication, Brian's life had started to fall apart. That night, Brian was found motionless at the bottom of his swimming pool. Paramedics were called, but it was too late. The official cause of death was listed as drowning, later changed to death by misadventure. However, many details didn't add up, and decades later, questions still lingered on what truly happened that night. Cochford Farm was not just any property. It once belonged to A. Milne, the creator of Winnie the Pooh. Brian bought it in November 1968, hoping to leave behind the pressure and chaos of London. At the time, he was being closely watched by Sergeant Norman Pilcher, a police officer known for going after famous musicians, often on questionable grounds. Brian had already been convicted twice and had narrowly avoided prison by promising to change his lifestyle. By the middle of 1969, his health, focus, and relationship with the band had declined. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards decided to replace him with guitarist Mick Taylor. Even so, Brian hoped Cochford Farm would be a fresh start. He hired Tom Keelock, a Rolling Stones associate with underworld ties, to manage renovations, and builder Frank Thorogood to handle the work. But things quickly went downhill. Thorogood and his crew started living there without paying rent. They hosted parties and used Brian's pool freely. On July 2nd, frustrated, Brian told Thorogood he was fired and wouldn't be paid until he left. Only hours later, Brian was dead. That night, only 3 people were confirmed to be present: Brian's girlfriend Anna Wolin, Tom Keelock's girlfriend Janet Lawson, and builder Frank Thorogood. Some say others, like Brian's ex-girlfriend Suki Poitier, may have been there, but it was never proven. Late in the evening, Brian decided to swim. According to Lawson, he and Thorogood were playfully splashing around in the pool before Brian asked her to find his inhaler. While she was searching, Thorogood came into the house looking pale and shaken. When Lawson asked what happened, he said nothing. She rushed outside and saw Brian at the bottom of the pool. She screamed for help, but Thorogood didn't move right away. When the ambulance arrived after midnight, Brian was gone. The coroner's report found both stimulants and depressants in his system, along with about 3 pints of beer, less than usual for him. Strangely, fresh water, not pool water, was in his lungs, and a nearby trough raised more questions. Experts later suggested he might have still been conscious when he went under, deepening the mystery. After his death, Anna Wolin was quickly sent back to Sweden by the band's management. She later said she believed Brian's passing wasn't natural. Suspicion soon focused on Frank Thorogood, who had a clear conflict with Brian, an unexplained wrist injury, and was later seen burning things at the property. Years later, in 1993, Thorogood allegedly confessed to Tom Keelock before his death, admitting that he had been the one who killed Brian, saying he had simply snapped. The confession was never verified. Keelock later claimed that police were instructed to drop the case, noting that Frank Thorogood was the only one who could have been charged. The case was reopened in 1984, 1994, and 2009 after journalist Scott Jones gave police 600 new files, including a statement from Janet Lawson saying she'd been pressured to change her story. No charges were filed. Brian, Thorogood, and Keelock all died years apart. Even Norman Pilcher, the officer who had targeted Brian, was later convicted of misconduct in 1972 and imprisoned. He later admitted his actions were politically driven. Brian Jones was a gifted but troubled musician surrounded by people he couldn't fully trust. The official ruling remains death by misadventure, but with missing evidence, conflicting accounts, and a rumored confession. The mystery of what happened that night at Cochford Farm remains unsolved.